Welcome to today's webinar, The State of AI, Lessons from the Field. I'm Allison Ryder, Senior Project Editor at MIT SMR, and I will be your moderator today. Wanted to let you know that this event is going to be recorded, so it will be available to all attendees about 3 to 4 business days after the end of this live event. And in addition, today's slides will be made available to all attendees. We welcome your questions for our speakers today, and to submit those, you may enter them at any time in the questions module on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll answer as many questions as time permits. If you're having any audio difficulties while listening via computer, please sign out of the webinar and sign in again, or check the help link in the upper part of your console. We thank our collaborator, the Boston Consulting Group, for their support of this webinar. Our speakers today are Shervin Khodabandeh, who is the Senior Partner and Managing Director at BCG, and also the co-leader of BCG's AI practice in North America. Ranjeet Banerjee is the Worldwide President of Medication Management Solutions at Becton, Dickinson and Company. And Sam Ransbotham is a professor in the Information Systems Department at the Carroll School of Management at Boston College, as well as guest editor of MIT Sloan Management Review's Artificial Intelligence Big Ideas Initiative. We have an exciting program for you today, as we'll review some of the most interesting findings from the MIT SMR BCG Global Executive Research Study and Report, Winning with AI. We're also very excited to have Ranjeet here with us to share a case study on his organization's use of artificial intelligence. After the full talk, we'll have some time for Q&A. But first, Shervin, I'm going to turn things to you to begin the presentation.
Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to speak with you on this topic that I'm sure is near and dear to all of you here. This is our third year of collaboration with MIT on this topic. Our last 2 reports focused on value creation potential of AI and demystifying what it is and what it's not, and how it sort of creates value, and some of the key trends in how companies scale AI. This year, our purpose was to really understand why there is such a big gap between companies who are getting value from AI and those who are not. And AI being a technology topic in the minds of many people, it is really easy to underestimate the importance of the non-tech factors. So this year, our purpose was to really better understand the organizational, cultural, and leadership factors that differentiate pioneers from those who are still struggling. A bit on the context of the report. Similar to prior years, the data was a mix of global survey of nearly 3,000 companies, including 300 companies in China, across sectors and geographies, as well as in-depth interviews with some senior business leaders who have real valuable experience to share on how they have been scaling AI solutions. And again, Ranjeet, we're very pleased to have you here to share with us some of your experiences in how Becton Dickinson has scaled AI in the organization. Before jumping into the details, I'd like to do a quick poll on the level of AI adoption in your organization. So we'll take a few seconds for people to read the questions and respond.
Okay, it looks like about half of you all voted. We have closed the poll, Shervin, and we've got an interesting distribution here. I'm curious how this maps to our survey data on this question. So 14% are saying that their organizations have not adopted AI and they have no plans to do so. 32% say they have not adopted AI but do have plans to do so in the near future. 28% have one or more small AI pilots in process. And 23% have incorporated AI into some processes and offerings. You're only looking at about 3% who have extensively incorporated AI. So the distribution is really folks who have not yet done much with AI but plan to, or have a few small projects in the pilot stage.
Yeah, I would say, so thanks for that. I'd say this is not surprising, of course, and it sort of corroborates some of the results we're seeing, which basically says, look, for everybody but the 14%, it's an important topic, right? So, our results say about 90 some percent, 90 to 92%. So it's critical for most. Some are, I would say, your last two numbers, which are in the low 20s, and the last one, which is like in the 3 or 4%. So very few have successfully scaled it across, and quite a few, maybe in the 20 or 30%, have incorporated into some of the business processes and offerings. And this is very consistent with the result I'll show you in a second. So effectively, the focus of our talk today is going to be, why is that the case? Being important to almost everybody and have everybody having some plans, why is it that such a small fraction are actually getting value? So now, what do we see this year? We see that over 90% of organizations, say that it's a critically important topic and view it as either an opportunity or a risk. We also see that the perception of risk is steadily increasing over the last 3 years. Now, we believe this risk represents both a fear of being left behind, as in if we don't do it, our competitors will and share shift from us, as well as the risk inherent in launching these large programs, so the risk of failure. Now, let's look at the small portion, the about 30% or so, who are saying, look, AI has created some value for us, right? Where are they? Who are, like, what industries are they, and where is this value coming from? We see that the tech sector is being on the high side of the spectrum, and education and government are on the lower side. And the question here specifically was, has there been any impact from AI, either on the revenue or cost side, in the last 3 years? So we've purposely been very liberal with the definition of impact, yet we see that the average is still quite low at about 30%, which is sort of similar, Allison, to the poll results. Regarding where the value is coming from, for those who are seeing value, we see that average is getting around 30%. That's the gray bar in the middle. We see the tech and IT industry are on the higher end, and we see government and education are on the lower end. So now, when we ask this group, where is the value going to come from in the future, we're taking a functional view here, right? So you see that across almost the entirety of the functions and business processes of a given organization, from manufacturing to servicing to sales to legal to HR, a large group of people believe that there's value. Now, when you take a sector view of this, obviously, it's a busy chart here, but the answer is a little different for each sector. So when you look at consumer, for example, you see a fair amount in product development and R&D, supply chain, ops, sales, customer servicing, manufacturing, a little bit in support functions, right? When you look at, for example, energy, not surprisingly, you see a large amount in operations, manufacturing, and supply chain, but also large level of future sort of focus in the back office functions and finance and risk and information technology. When you look at financial services, you see that, but you also see a fair amount of focus in sales and customer servicing, similar in other industries. But what's really, really interesting here is that very few of these numbers are in single digits. And it's safe to say that the general belief is that there is value in all sectors and in all functions. Now, having said all of that, it's a fact that apart from a 30% minority, most companies are struggling despite their ambition and investments, and many yet to have to see any impact. Now, many believe that this picture will change in the future and the trend will reverse. But what is even more alarming is that even in 5 years, there's still a large group believe that they won't be able to get any value from AI. And so what this tells us is that, look, we have an interesting situation where we have 90% ambition, majority are not seeing value, and that picture changes a bit, but not really, that much. Now, leaders are continuing to invest and do so more across the board, invest in talent, in technology, in data, and in processes, and they see the most impact. We see that these investments are paying off for them, and those who invest beyond just the technology, so that means again the data and the process and the talent, see most impact. So we have an interesting situation here where everyone believes there is value across many functions across the organization. Nearly everybody invests in AI in some shape or form, but only a small group see that this value is translating to the bottom line. And this group is precisely the group who will continue to invest even more, and hence this gap will continue to get wider and harder to overcome for those who are struggling. Now, I want to segue quickly into talent topic for just a minute, because it's a question that I get asked a lot and many companies are struggling with. Do we buy or do we build? What do we do? So when you look at the winning companies, they view AI as a competitive differentiator. And so they built their own AI talent. Now, it's not to say they don't use vendors or third parties or consultants. Of course they do. They often use external help as accelerator or an enabler of sorts. But what they don't do is they don't rely entirely on external help and forever. They invest in hiring and training the core AI talent. So that's the data scientists and the engineers, but also invest in training and reskilling the broader organization, not just those who produce AI, but also those who will consume AI. The marketer, the store manager, the account executive, the process manager, right? The people who do those processes and functions that I showed you on the prior slide, all those processes from R&D to manufacturing to finance and accounting, right? They invest in actually reskilling those guys too. Now, on the other hand, when you look at the chart to the right, those who rely entirely on external help and have no formal programs in place to hire and build internally are also the group that struggles most with getting impact. Now, getting back to the AI gap and why so many are struggling. So what makes this particularly difficult? Here's the answers that we get, right? You see a range of things from competing priorities to unclear business case to limited tech and limited leadership support, culture change. And when I look at this data, tech aside, tech and talent aside, the general sentiment I get is we are doing stuff. If you consider this data in the holistic picture of, there are many people who are experimenting, many people are doing, some proofs of concept, the 90% who believe it creates value. The picture that forms is a little bit like we're doing stuff, but we're not really focusing on it, or we don't really have a business case, we don't have the leadership behind it. And so it's a little bit like death by 1,000 cuts. And this, ironically, most of these challenges are not tech challenges, right? These are organizational inertia challenges and have very little to do with data science and technology, but a lot to do with what it takes to break down organizational barriers, create process change, create culture change, and effectively launch a real business transformation, which is the only way to get value from AI. So the paradox in AI is that when you look at it superficially, you see algorithms and data science and technology. And these are absolutely necessary, but far from sufficient. In fact, most of the challenges and the value will come from the business process change that AI enables or AI requires. And that is where I believe 70% of the effort will be. All those business processes we talked about in the earlier part, from manufacturing and sales and marketing and risk and supply chain, for AI to create scalable value for many organizations, some of these business processes have to be reimagined or re-engineered. And let me just give you an example. For example, take marketing, right? When AI is used to drive personalized marketing and personalized experiences for the customer, which is a big focus for many organizations right now. It is true that the AI engine will score millions of customers and dynamically create much more relevant offers and match these offers to the right customers. It's all true. But consider how the actual marketing process has to change, and consider how the job of the individual marketer has to change, and his or her skill sets have to change, right? The marketer goes from the old state of being where they have maybe 10 segments of customers and 20 offers to now tens of thousands of micro segments and many individualized offers and hundreds of thousands of unique sort of characteristics that go together to create one highly personalized offer. And to do this, it's not trivial, because the entire process of creating an offer, getting it through legal, and offer execution has to now dramatically change. Now, in my experience and in our experience working across organizations who are getting large impact and at scale, they do 5 things quite well. Number 1 is where and how they focus. This is what we call the AI unicorns. They pick a few areas where AI will dramatically improve their business. They don't waste their focus on 100 different small experiments, because when the mindset is of experimentation, it is much easier to give up. And it's much harder to break down the barriers that we talked about. So they pick a few and they go big. The second is they establish a new process for development and incubation and deployment of AI. Now, many companies don't have a process for that, right? They use a traditional technology process to build AI solutions. And that process will fail to create the business process change that's required. So this incubation process is different. It's rooted in agile principles, in rapid prototyping, in rapid test and learn, and iterative build. And for many organizations, that is a new sort of process capability that they have to build. Third, on the AI execution, that's the core data science and tech and overall AI ecosystem that is absolutely critical to get right? They build scalable data platforms. They have a pretty robust and scalable technology stack. They have powerful AI workbench. They invest in hiring and cultivating AI talent. And they have a pretty well-defined strategy in how they interact with the broader AI ecosystem of vendors and technology solutions and consultants. The fourth one is that they realize that the interaction model in the organization has to change. So this requires new ways of working. So what does that mean? That means that for the process change that we talked about to take place, the way that the AI solution gets developed has to be empowered by a new interaction model between the business process owners, the AI developers, and effectively the consumers and the producers of AI. So this new way of working is the fourth area that many of companies who are getting value establish programs to get this new interaction model and governance between different parts of the organization right. And then finally, they invest significantly in process change. In fact, they start the AI development with a very strong appreciation of the core business processes that it will impact and how those processes will have to be reimagined or re-engineered. In fact, they don't even write a single line of code unless they have the right business process people in the core AI team. So this is the essence of what I wanted to cover today. I am going to now pass to Ranjeet Banerjee, who will share with us his experiences in how Becton Dickinson has adopted AI and how they have scaled AI. Over to you, Ranjeet.
So I'll start with a very quick introduction about BD and about my division. So my name is Ranjeet Banerjee. I'm the president of Medication Management Division for BD. BD is one of the largest medical technology companies in the world. And we have been pioneering a lot of improvements in healthcare delivery in acute care settings and hospitals. We have been also doing things in drug discovery, in life sciences, as well as better therapy management. So Med Management Solutions, the division that I lead, our focus is entirely on how do we make the medication management process in hospitals, in other settings like outside the hospital settings, how do we make it safer, simpler, and smarter? What does that mean? Medication management processes, think of it as in a hospital, in a typical 300-bed hospital in the country, there could be something like 6,000 to 10,000 medications being prescribed by the physicians every day. And there's a complex set of processes, steps for the medications to flow from the moment a physician enters an order in the electronic medical record system of a hospital to it getting going to a nurse and then getting administered to a patient and then reconciliation. There's a lot of work, and that could also lead to a lot of errors. So our focus as a business is to improve the medication management process, and we do that through a variety of connected technologies, which are connected to the infrastructure of the hospital, and thereby we create a whole platform for medication management and kind of leading the globe and in the US with that offering. So when we looked at AI, instead of leading with what we can do with AI, what we did was we said, first, what are some of the problems that our customers want us to solve where we don't have that much of success today? And one of the problems is the opioid crisis. And that's a very, very big problem in the country. All of you have probably heard about it. And one element of the opioid crisis is what is called drug diversion, which is the diversion of painkillers and opioids in a hospital setting, which are meant for patients, but are being used for non-patient use, for illegal use. And that is feeding to the opioid crisis. So we said, okay, how can we use technology to solve some of our biggest problems, which is part of our strategic goals to improve medication management, make it safer, simpler, and smarter? So that's kind of how we got to looking at AI. So I'm going to walk through a few slides that explain what the problem is and then what did we do. So today, 10 to 15% of the general population misuse substances at some point in their lives. And that's a pretty big number. And that also translates to clinicians, whether it's nurses, pharmacists, and this happens in healthcare settings. And this is something that actually it impacts multiple settings around the country and also outside. And it's very unfortunate because some of the best people, some of the best, most talented of our healthcare partners sometimes get addicted. Now, if left undetected, this diversion of opioids has got multiple challenges for a healthcare provider. There is risk to the diverter. There is serious patient safety risk because you have impaired clinicians now in a hospital setting. And there's also significant liability risk to a healthcare organization because this is misuse of medication. So the current methods, as I mentioned, are ineffective. This is a great example where you say, okay, this is a real problem. It fits in with our strategic objectives of making medication safer, simpler, smarter. Can we use a different technology like AI where we can address some of the challenges of a reactive approach today, a very time-consuming reconciliation of medication? ADC stands for automated dispensing cabinets and EMR transactions, electronic medical records, high false positives. How can we use new technology like AI to solve this? What we came up with, and I'll show you a little glimpse of the application itself, but we came up with how can we improve the accuracy and reduce the time by using machine learning enabled algorithms to improve anomaly detection. An anomaly is if you can't trace an opioid. If an opioid was dispensed but not administered to a patient, if the time taken between when it was dispensed to when it was actually administered is too long, if the waste can't be reconciled? So imagine multiple data points. Now these are thousands of medications that are flowing. Not all of them, but a part of them are opioids. And that's the complexity. And this is where AI and technology can come in, where how do we improve accuracy, reduce the time, and reduce the effort, and also create a system that is constantly learning. Because we have, being the leaders in healthcare delivery in this space, we have a large footprint. A lot of the large healthcare systems in the country, in the US, are our customers. So how do we use that footprint we have to bring that data together and create a self-learning, self-correcting, self-improving application that can address this huge, humongous problem of diversion, and by so also in some ways impact the opioid crisis. So this is just a screenshot of some of the applications we developed, and without getting into a lot of details, the main thing we did was we said, how can we use multiple behavior signals and combine this into a single risk score to identify anomalous behavior? How can we make it very simple for our customers to see, oh, something is not right here? And that gives a signal to then dig deeper. And then we use machine learning enabled algorithms to improve the anomaly detection. How do we make sure that we are not wasting people's time by sending them down a path where the accuracy is not good? How can we make the anomaly detection much, much more accurate? The next two bullets are also very important. How do we make the workflow very intuitive? You know, as we get into AI, as we get into digital transformation, a big part of it is simplifying the lives of people who are going to use those workflows. How do we make instead of 10 reports and dashboards, how do we make the workflow intuitive so that it's easy, it's fast, it's accurate, and it really solves a major problem? And then automated reconciliation all steps of the way between our own products as well as the hospital. EMR stands for, think of it as the hospital information system. So making sure that we do the reconciliations all along the way. So just stepping back here again, the main points here is, as we develop this application, we wanted to make sure that it is self-learning. As we do process more and more data, it gets more intelligent, and we are seeing that now. We are rapidly expanding our footprint. We just launched it it's been about a little more than a year, and we are rapidly getting a lot of good, very good customer feedback and from healthcare systems, healthcare providers, and we are rapidly gaining a footprint here. Make the workflows intuitive, as well as make the insights as simple and easy to follow so that it fits into your workflow rather than it gets into a separate kind of a dashboard. This is make it very, very simple. And if we look at the core analytics that we do, there are three clear areas we're using AI. One is what we call dynamic peer grouping. Basically, think of it in a very simple way. Imagine that we got different pockets of patients in a healthcare system, in a hospital. Now, depending on the nature of their why they are there, they could be consuming different level of opioids. If I've got a certain condition, I may be in more pain, I may need more opioids. How can we use AI to do peer grouping so that just because I need more opioids, it doesn't signal that as an anomaly, right? Then risk scoring. How do we use AI to create a simple risk score? And this is very interesting. If you see, the IDs are masked here by intention because we don't want to create bias. So really use AI to detect where are the anomalies, and that then in an unbiased way allows the hospitals to dig in and find, is that anomaly acceptable or is there a real problem behind this? And then having reason codes. And these reason codes really help us look at what are the anomalous behaviors and which are the most different from peers and that can help us start the investigation. So that kind of finishes what I wanted to share through slides. Just to summarize, our approach to AI, and I will emphasize a lot of words that and the methodologies that Shervin talked about. We didn't go in with say, okay, how do we use AI and where can we use it? We started with what's the problem we are trying to solve? How does this fit with our business strategy? How do we bring it, if it fits with our business strategy, to me, it is all about how can we solve our customers, in this case, healthcare providers, how can we solve their problems faster and better and really create a meaningful difference, which without AI, without technology, in the past, we have not been able to do. The next thing that Shervin had talked about is link this to the business processes. So we brought in we included this into our innovation process. We have a dedicated team. We have very clear senior leadership support, starting with myself as the president of the division and all my leadership team members. And then we also created agile methodologies. Now the team is doing new versions of the software. They are launching in 3 to 4 months. So our customers are benefiting from that. So these are the things I would reinforce that I feel we learned along the way. The last thing I'll say is for any organization, you can think of using technology for customer-facing applications like we did, which is, can we use it for new products? Can we create new value where we could not with other products, without using AI, with our products? And either you could also use AI and technology to improve internal efficiencies. Now, I'm not going to give examples of that, but we are doing both in BD. We are using a technology like AI to improve internal efficiencies, internal working. But here's an example of how we took AI and applied it to a real customer challenge that fit into our strategic roadmap, our strategic objectives, and then really delivered new value to our customers that without AI, honestly, I don't think we could have got to these kind of solutions. So hope that is helpful. With that, I will turn this back to Sam.
Ranjeet, thanks again for taking the time to share your experiences with us. It's a great example. The example, the drug diversion example, illustrates many of the positive aspects of modern AI. I like the idea that he's talking about moving from reactive to time-consuming to things with many high false positives to a situation where you've got much greater precision through AI. I want to call attention to a couple of points there, and I'll tie to some of those points to what we found in our global survey. As a reminder, feel free to suggest questions. You can put the questions in the chat box. I think Allison is developing those, and we'll have some time at the end to go through those. But the core of the example from Becton Dickinson isn't really about saving money. Yes, I mean, there are aspects of saving money in the example, but the key is that the use of ML and AI are really allowing Becton Dickinson to do things that really weren't possible before or weren't practical before. And a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence also talks about the potential to replace humans. But I don't think he mentioned replacing humans at all. This is an example about helping humans, not replacing them. I think that's a good, strong point there. It points out some of the new opportunities from AI, some of the opportunities that are now feasible that weren't feasible before. So the Becton Dickinson example isn't just about better, faster, cheaper through AI. It's about enabling more. But it's true that many organizations start with a focus of ways to save money. And I'm not certainly discounting the benefits of cost savings. Organizations are definitely using AI to save money and to save time. But if you only focus on cost, that may shortchange some of the value that's possible through AI. In our global survey, we asked about people's experience with cost savings and revenue gains, as well as their expectations for future cost and revenue gains. So you see these bars here on the left. These are people who experience past positive cost savings from AI. So those people, 44% of them look forward to the future and they think they can get even more cost savings. But only 27% are thinking about the future of revenue. Now, if we flip over and focus on people that have gotten past impact from revenue, it's a very different story. So people who have gotten a taste of what the future revenue impact from AI can be, 72% of them see even more possibilities for more revenue with AI. I like this. They see the possibilities and then they get creative with what they can do in new ways. This is, normal economic actors using their experience to inform their expectation of what happens in the future. And I like this a lot. It's a little abstract. One of the concrete examples that came out in our report was from Deutsche Bank. And so we were talking with Shivaji Dasgupta, who's a managing director at Deutsche Bank. And they have a new credit product. And so they've used artificial intelligence to develop a loan approval tool. But because they have this loan approval tool that's embedded in AI, they are able to get scale on loan approval. And they can think about approving loans that are much, much smaller value than traditional loans. Traditional loans had to be much larger to afford the time that the processing time. But because they have this new tool, they can make this available online and reach a new market for people who have never, probably would never go through the trouble of applying for a loan and get a much, much smaller loan. But it's a brand new product, and it's a product that didn't really exist before. And I like that example because it's a very concrete example, not just of processing loans faster, but of creating an entirely new way of streaming revenue from using artificial intelligence. The point here is that organizations that have seen revenue impact from AI really see the potential for much more. We're going to try another poll here, I hope, and let's see how this one goes as well. One thing I wanted to ask people was, who's in charge of the AI initiatives in your organization? And so I've only got, really three choices. Is it your CIO who's in charge of AI initiatives? Is it the CEO? Or is it some other C-level executive? Or is it just someone else in the organization? So I'm not sure what the correct best time to wait here for responses, but pick one of these. Within our global survey, we actually gave people a few more options than this. I've tried to reduce this for the purpose of the webinar, just to make it a little simpler. So who's in charge of AI initiatives in your organization? So it looks like we got CIOs are in charge about 21% of the time, CEOs 17% of the time, and other executives 30% of the time, and then our classic other category. And the point that I wanted to make from that is that when we did our global survey, we asked people if they're getting value from AI. And so it looks like most of you, it's pretty evenly spread across whether or not people are putting it in CIO, CEO, a little bit less, and then others areas. But when we ask people, are you getting value from your AI initiatives? The people who are getting value are much more likely to have the AI initiatives placed under the CEO or other C-level executives. So if you look at that CIO thing, if AI is located within the IT part of the organization, they're only about half as likely to be seeing value from artificial intelligence. What we interpreted that is a bit of a AI trap. If you're like many of our respondents, where the chief CIO is in charge, you may not be getting the value from AI that you might if it was located other places in the organization. And my point here is not to denigrate CIOs. I don't think there's anything wrong with CIOs. And many CIOs are obviously aligned well with the strategy of their organization and are integral parts. But I think we may be seeing that IT in these organizations can be more of a cost center, focusing on scale economies and cost savings. Because AI involves computers, there may be a temptation to relegate it to IT. But if if that works, if IT is aligned with strategy of the organization and isn't cost focused, but if not, this organization could struggle to get value from AI. We think about this as an IT trap for AI, and we think that's a mindset to be a bit wary of. It may limit the potential value from AI. So the point here is that companies that are viewing AI through maybe a narrow tech lens, may be assigning it to IT, may not get the transformational value from AI that others might expect. So how are they doing this? If you want to execute strategy with AI, not execute a strategy for AI, but a strategy with AI, how do you do this? So we split our survey respondents into people like pioneers who understand the most about artificial intelligence and are further along the process, and people who are less active are investigators and experimenters. And we see that people who are pioneers are investing in projects with greater potential impact across the organization. They're not focused on these small impact projects. They tend to think about longer horizons. So experimenters or people that are still investigating tend towards more short-term type projects, whereas the pioneers are thinking a little more long-term. But we thought this was particularly fun, that people like who are pioneers are really embracing projects with a lot of risk. And I think that ties also to the revenue and cost distinction. If you know that you can save money with something like AI, but can you create new revenue? These leading organizations seem to be taking a significantly greater risks in their project selection. Shervin also mentioned the incubation processes and how those differ for AI. We see that we ask people, are your processes for projects different or the same? And people that are pioneers are much more likely to have projects that have followed a different process for AI projects than the normal IT project standpoint. I thought we might see more difference here. It looks like almost everyone is leaning towards new processes for AI projects. Pioneers are also embracing many more projects. So people like investigators and experimenters are just a few projects, much more likely to have a few projects, whereas people that are pioneers are much more likely to have a greater number of projects and lots of different places to apply. And finally, they're able to get those projects to scale. They don't tend to end with the just try it out phase. They're able to get them into production and get value from them. And so our report this year really had 5 main points. The first is about making sure your AI aligned with the overall business strategy. And we see that. That came out in Ranjit's discussion. They came out with Shervin's discussion. Integrating AI as an overall business strategy rather than something specific for AI is important. These leading organizations are taking on these large, riskier efforts that prioritize revenue over cost. They're thinking about how the organization will use artificial intelligence, how they'll consume it, not just how do we make some new AI thing, but how do we get our organizations to use those results and use the processes. They're very highly linked with their overall digital transformation efforts. And finally, they invest in the talent and the process and data that's required to achieve success with AI. I think about now we're probably getting close to time here, and I think Allison has some questions, if I remember correctly. And so let's switch to the question part of the program. And I think that Allison is going to moderate that. And I think we're going to switch over to you can see us.
That would be great if our speakers could turn on their cameras. We can put some faces to these voices that have just shared some really interesting content with us. And Ranjeet, Sam, awesome. Shervin, hi. So we did get some really good questions from the audience during this portion. So thanks everyone who submitted. We'll get to as many as possible. In terms of some of the points that came up, so this is a meaty one. I think I'll throw this one over to Sam. We had a question about data governance. So how important, this writer asks, is data governance for implementing AI, and especially at what time should companies come up with a data governance strategy?
Well, I will have 15 seconds to answer that. I mean, it's a huge topic of how to
what we've seen, and this is coming from some of our past reports with BCG, is that these are inherently data-based applications. The algorithms are much less than the data itself. And we've all heard the same sort of truisms about you putting the data in, you get what comes out of the data. These are fundamentally related to data, and as such, data governance just becomes huge. And particularly, I'll switch over to think about provenance. That how do you, if you have all this data, and let's say it's all perfect and beautiful, how do you get everyone in the organization to know what the source of that data is, to use it well? And that aligns with our point that we didn't really talk about much today, with more on the consumption of artificial intelligence. To get that consumption right, you've got to not just produce these great data sets and great algorithms on top of that data, but people in the organization have to be able to use it.
Certainly, yeah. Picking up on this sort of organizational design type line of questions here, somebody was curious, do you require a role like business analyst, as you have so much work now for data science teams? I mean, how do you think about those distinctions very specifically? I wonder, Shervin, if you have thoughts there.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. I think every organization requires a role like business analyst, right? I mean, of course, business analysis is a core part of what every business function has, but it's not the same as data scientists. And I think some organizations fall in the trap of saying we have analysts, therefore we have analytics, therefore we have advanced analytics, therefore we have AI. So my answer is, business analyst usually sits better inside business units, inside business functions. They're not developers of AI. They would be users of AI and the algorithms and the value it creates. The core AI team is different. The way these two groups work together often in what we've seen is that business analysts do a lot of work on sort of reporting and ad hoc understanding of trends and factors. And to the extent that AI can improve that and provide richer intelligence, that's the point of interaction. And to the extent that AI can automate, or the AI group, to the extent that business need could be factored into the AI algorithm so that the output of AI fits into the business needs, that's helpful, but those are fundamentally different skill sets and salary bands and talents.
And if I can just add to what Shervin said, one other way of thinking about it is, once we have identified where we want to apply AI, what is that problem we're trying to solve, that there are at least 3 core capabilities that need to come together. There is, and it's a little different from just business analysis. There's a core domain expertise. Let's just, again, taking the diversion example, we needed pharmacists who understand the domain. Second core capability is data scientists. And as Shervin rightly said, you need that data science capability to really get into AI. And then finally, you need the programmers. And at a minimum, there are others as well, but at a minimum, you need these 3 capabilities to work together as a team to solve the problem.
Right.
Yep.
Another question for you, Ranjeet. This came up from a couple different people asking about bias, and of course, we confront the issue of bias in algorithms in any aspect of AI implementation. Specifically, though, in terms of the health site application, how are you preventing bias from creeping into the single risk score?
So what we have done is we have built in, there are certain methodologies and tools that our technical team has built in to look for drifts and bias. And we are planning to do that on an ongoing basis. It is a good question, and it is important as we launch AI tools, we build in both technology and processes to look for drifts and bias. And that's kind of what we have done.
I like that he answered that not as a static point in time, but as an ongoing process, which is
exactly
critical.
Exactly. It has to be ongoing because drifts will always happen. And how do you then correct for those drifts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think first of all, it's a very big, like the broader issue of bias in data and the ethical implications of that is something that many organizations are struggling with. Totally echo what Ranjeet is saying. There is algorithmic and technology sort of uh, uh, approaches to be aware of that and model for it, but that is not enough, because you need to also create the human machine interaction to be constantly aware of what could go wrong and preempt it. And then in many cases some things will go wrong, so the question is, what are the mechanisms in place to quickly identify and adapt when something goes wrong? And this again goes back to the broader point around the new ways of working and the governance model in AI, which is beyond tech. It is, it could be highly tech enabled, but that human machine interaction, the governance model, the ability to look for bias, correct it, apologize for it, have a PR program. Many of our clients actually are, spending a lot of effort in managing that whole ecosystem, and then fixing it algorithmically where it can be fixed.
Mm-hmm. So to
That's a
jump
good
back,
point.
go ahead, Sam.
Actually, I was just going to say that what I liked about that too is that you broadened out data governance to be a much broader topic there than just focusing on the quality, quality of column 3.
Yeah. I just wanted to jump back to kind of the early stages. A few people now are echoing an earlier question about, what advice do you have for organizations who are just getting started? So they're competing against organizations that have trained models, that have lessons learned. Like, where do you jump in? Is it the same kind of process, or is there a different way to jump into that now to compete with these other competitors?
I'll go first, and would love to get Ranjit, your reaction to this, and Sam also. I think three things. I think one, pick very carefully what you focus on. So pick those AI unicorns, because if they focus on experimentation, the results of those experiments would be, guess what? AI works. Like, yes, we could do it. Or it doesn't work because we got to a roadblock and we stopped. So it's just, so align it with the core business strategy and pick one or two big things that it's worth it, and then mobilize around it. And it's not a 3-month project, it's a multi-year project. So think about it that way. So that's one. Two is many companies that are just starting might need external support and accelerators, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, and you should do that, and we help a lot of clients do that. But you need to build your own capability, because this is a competitive advantage. So begin to think through your AI sort of ecosystem and talent. And then the third one is, don't underestimate the business processes that it will have to change. Don't go build it in a vacuum and produce it and then say, now let's get everybody to please use it, because it's not a tech implementation, right? The consumers and the producers have to work very closely together. And that requires a new way of organizational interaction between these groups. So focus on the right stuff, get some talent, and then create that be mindful of that interaction model. And many of our many organizations we've seen have gotten impact quite quickly that way, and then they've scaled it beyond just a handful of use cases.
And Shervin, I'll build on what you said. That was a great answer. And there's, I think of 3 or 4 questions we can ask, and to me, it's really agnostic of the size of the organization. It could be a startup, it could be a large company, it could be something in between. It starts with, what problem are we trying to solve? And that goes back to what Shervin was saying as well. What problem are we trying to solve? What gives us the right to play? What gives us the right to win? Right? And then when that piece is clear, I think you can start framing the other questions. Okay, should we do it ourselves? Should we partner it? Over time, if it is a core capability, you need to have at least some capabilities in house, and maybe it's a hybrid model. But if it's a core capability of our offering, of any company, some part of that talent and capability has to be within and has to be grown with it.
Shervin showed a picture of an iceberg for one of the earlier points there, and I think we could pull that same analogy here, that 10% or the top that you see may be the production part of artificial intelligence, but getting it used within the optimization is the part that's underneath. That wasn't the way he used the iceberg, but that's a different way of thinking about a different iceberg, that there's a lot more beyond just the production, which is exactly to their point.
Yeah, oh, that was actually absolutely my intended point of using the iceberg. So thank you for articulating more elegantly what I wanted to say. Yes, that is the whole point. Absolutely.
I think we can fit in a couple more questions. We are going to stay on just a couple minutes past the top of the hour to answer a few questions here. One I thought was interesting, that we see AI viewed often as a threat to competitive advantage and what have you, but this viewer also believes it's forcing humans to be more creative, and is curious what your views are on that, about how creativity fits into this equation. Shervin, I see you nodding. I'm curious if you have any examples to point to.
Yeah, I totally do. I mean, I think that example I gave on marketing is a great example of that. So totally the future. I mean, look, the data corroborates it. The focus on revenue growth, the sort of the move away from job cuts and all that, is that the human-machine interaction will improve. The human will get better. The machine will get better. This is exactly what has happened with any major technology revolution. Is not that the humans went away, is that they did better things. The machine got better, and humans got better, and more, so on and so forth. So that's sort of the analog. But so look, I mean, creativity-wise, in that marketing example, right? The marketer job before AI would typically be, let me analyze some data, let me figure out of 20 or 50 offers I have, who I send it to. And it's a lot more sort of data collection, a little bit of data analysis, campaign management, etc. In advanced companies who are using AI to drive their customer marketing and customer sort of experience engines, the role of creativity is important, because the marketer now sits down and envisions new ways of experiences that the customer will have, and new ways of interacting with the customer, and new ways of collecting information from the customer, that so that better offers and better experiences could be curated. And that's a truly creative role, which is really the intention of marketing role, because now they're unshackled from all the data and all the plumbing that they have to do. And so that's one example of creativity creeping into roles that have gotten sort of dull over time.
I mean, we got 500 people on this webinar. How many of them are going home early because they've run out of stuff to do? I'm guessing, I'm guessing 0 to none of them. I mean, and most of the things we're doing are the things we have to do, the things that are like rote or occupy our time, but are not that creative part there. I think we may have a future where we run out of things to do, but we are far from that right now.
Fair point. Last question. I think this speaks nicely to some of our findings that were not explicitly presented here, but we had a viewer ask about the opinion of the evolving role of the CDO, so the Chief Digital Officer, versus the CIO. And I think that might get to some of our integration of strategy points. Sam, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how CDOs and CIOs could or should interact in this environment of implementing new AI solutions.
Well, I don't want to be the read the report guy, but let me be the read the report guy. We've got a nice chart there that we didn't have time for today that looks at 88% of the people who are getting value from artificial intelligence have it tightly linked with their overall digital transformation. So that's a huge number for a survey like this. It's critical.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you to all of our speakers. I think we were just over time, and I appreciate everyone staying on to hear a couple final questions there. This is really all the time we have for today. So we will be sharing the video of this session over the next few days. Look out for that. We'll also be sending out a feedback survey by email. So we thank you very much. Appreciate any comments and questions you might have for us there. And that should conclude the program. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And of course, thank you to our speakers, Shervin, Ranjeet, Sam, and also to our collaborator on this, the Boston Consulting Group. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.